This is Soliloquy Radio, the podcast that discusses philosophy, spirituality, consciousness, and paths to a positive lifestyle from a non-theistic perspective. So sit back and open your mind. Yes, and welcome back to another episode of Soliloquy Radio. I'm your host, Otis Ayala, and on this episode, we will be discussing how to become happier. Yes, how do we become happier in our everyday lives? And this is an eternal question that we're always asking ourselves. I mean, to tell the truth, haven't we all wanted to be a little happier? But how do we actually become happier in our lives? So, I'm going to discuss 4 little techniques on how to become happier in our everyday lives, but I want to discuss the difference between happiness and a happy state, or what I like to call the heaven mind state. See, I like to use the term heaven state mind because heaven and hell are not destinations when you die. They aren't places that require you to worship a deity to give you entrance into one over the other. Heaven and hell are states of mind. This state of mind that determines your perception and ultimately your reality, because we can all be looking at the same thing, but it is in our perspective and our perception, which is how we interpret this information, that allow us to have different realities. And the reality of realizing a happier life is quite simple. It just requires a strong shift in perception. For the most part, happiness is an emotion. From a scientific point of view, it is an emotion that is triggered by an event, which can be identified by a chemical release of serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins in the brain. That moment, that trigger, is like all other moments and emotions. It's ever-fleeting passages of time, which we travel in and out of. And this brings me to a story. You see, there was an ancient fable of a powerful king, and he assembles a group of wise men and asks them to create something that will make him happy when he is sad. So after much deliberation, the sages hand him a simple ring with the words inscribed in it, "This too shall pass." And the ring worked perfectly, because every time the king was sad, he would simply look at the ring and read the inscription and understand that this too shall pass. However, the king soon realized that the ring was a double-edged sword. That when times were good and he was happy, the saying on the ring was equally true, because this too shall pass. This parable, this tale, is profound in that it teaches us that all moments pass with time. The bad times and the good times equally suffer the deterioration from the passage of time. You can't grasp that happy moment and expect it to last forever. You see, most of us are traveling through time in a constant battle where we're trying to pursue happiness while fighting off unhappiness. This constant battle results in a dissatisfaction, which ultimately results in being unhappy. See, then in our pursuit to be happy, we succumb to false endeavors outside of self that we believe will bring about an everlasting sense of happiness. The belief that if we had a bigger house or a nicer car or that promotion, then we can finally be happy. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with those items or wanting those things or the desire to obtain something that may give you momentary pleasure. The mistake comes when you believe those things will provide you lasting happiness. So I want you to soak that in for a minute and just think about what we've said, in which the difference between a happiness as an emotion and happiness as a mental state. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the 4 steps that I said that will allow you to reap more happiness in your daily life. You're listening to Soliloquy Radio. You can find this show on any major podcast provider or by simply visiting soliloquy.com and finding your preferred provider link on the listener page. The website will also contain links to the YouTube channel along with Facebook and Instagram pages. Remember to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the show. Welcome back, everybody. And we are talking about how to become happier and the steps that we can take in our lives in order to become happier. And these are 4 steps that I have seen, I have practiced, and that I am in the process of practicing in order to get a happier life. These are not the only 4 steps you can take, but it is a nice foundation. And like I said, it's not difficult, these steps, it is just different. And we have to learn to change that thought process that we have, shift it so that we can shift our reality. We shift our perception, we shift our reality, and then we shift our emotional or mental state. See, so how is it that we can be happier? How can we achieve this happier heaven mind state? First thing, step 1, the first thing we need to do is we need to learn to achieve a radical level of okayness. Not just a normal level of okayness, but a radical level of okayness. And so what is it that I mean when I say a radical level of okayness? And what I mean is that we have to be okay and accepting of all our moments in life. You see, for the majority of us, it's easy to accept the good times. I mean, they are the good times. We want those times. But the bad times in our life, not so much. We're not prepared for that. See, we need to move away from this thought process, this constant pursuit of one emotional state and the constant fighting off of the other. This is the source of our dissatisfaction and suffering in life. It's rooted in that thought process, a thought process that does not mentally or emotionally prepare us for the eventual bad times that befall all of us in life. We're in a constant, ever-failing battle to fend off those bad times, and you can't win that fight. Remember, in life, it's inevitable that we will suffer. Suffering in life is as much a part of life as the sunset is a part of every day. You can't stop it, and you have to take yourself to a level of radical okayness to accept it and life for what it is. You have to see those bad times and understand that these things will happen, and it's a waste of energy to try to stop them. And we need to learn a level of okayness and acceptance to go through them with an understanding that this too shall pass. There should be a disclaimer that I'm going to put here to say that you don't need, just because you have a radical level of okayness, doesn't mean you have to accept things that you have an ability to change. It doesn't mean you have to accept things like toxic or abusive relationships. It is also not saying that you should not feel grief or emotion when the sad times come. It does not say that you shouldn't feel grief when a loved one passes away. It is saying that when these moments occur, you can keep the supreme understanding that these things will occur in life, in all of our lives. You can feel emotion in that moment, but you will not waste energy in the thought process that bad things will never happen, and allow that moment to dictate your emotional perspective for an overdue amount of time. See, sometimes when these bad times befall us, we tend to sit in them and wallow in them and allow that moment to take more time in our daily lives that they should. We need to learn to live in the moment, live in the now, live in the present. And supreme okayness, it can be summed up by an analogy that I thought of that kind of sums up what supreme okayness is about. And it's the analogy of the half cup. And I'm sure that we've all heard this analogy of the half cup. But I want you to understand the viewpoint of supreme okayness when it comes to the half cup. You see, instead of seeing the cup as either half full or half empty, you see the cup instead as a means to quench your thirst. And with that understanding, you get to the point, the wisdom that eventually the cup is going to be empty. But only with an empty cup does the opportunity to refill it once again present itself. You cannot fill a cup that's already full. See, so instead of looking at something one way or another, those aren't the two ways to see something. You know how they say you have to think outside the box? Well, with a supreme okayness and conscious awakeness, you have to understand there's no box to begin with. The box that exists is only there because you put it there and you are putting those restraints on your mind. The box does not exist at all. The cup is neither half full nor half empty. The cup is there to quench your thirst. And only when you empty the cup do you have the opportunity to fill it again. If you're walking around with your cup full, you will never gain more wisdom or knowledge or understanding. So that is the concept of supreme okayness. And it's so much deeper than that. I will possibly do another podcast in which we'll delve into supreme okayness by itself. But we're going to go on and just lightly touch on that. The second step, because we're going to move on, is that we have to learn to transform moments in which we are normally neutral into moments that bring us joy. And what do I mean by neutral? See, in life, moments we either experience happiness, sadness, or we're neutral about things. All other emotions are kind of rooted in the happiness and sadness, but for the most part, it's happy or sad or neutral about something. So take, for example, right now you may be driving to work or sitting down, and you're not necessarily happy, but you're not necessarily sad. This commute for you or sitting down at this moment listening to this podcast is just a neutral moment for you. Now, I want you to imagine that you receive a phone call, and it's some horrible news. Perhaps a loved one is gravely ill or passed away, and you would now feel horrible after receiving this news, horrible and sad in that moment. And in that moment, what wouldn't you give to have the moment before that phone rang? To have the moment that you once regarded as neutral, right? That would now bring you joy if only you had it back. See, if we can learn to find joy in moments that we normally regard as neutral, we can increase the level of our joy. We can increase the time that we spend in a happiness state of mind. See, every morning that I wake up and I don't receive a phone call in the middle of the night that someone I love has been hospitalized or passed away, that's a good morning. Every afternoon that I experience without a migraine is a great afternoon. And every evening that I can walk through the door to my family and find them there is fantastic. So you learn to change your perspective, and then your reality changes along with it. When you are able to take those normally neutral moments, like right now, you don't have a toothache, but you're not thinking about that. But the moment that you have a toothache, you're in utter pain, wishing for a moment that you didn't have the toothache anymore. That neutral moment that you had before, that neutral moment is now a blissful moment when taken in relation to the moment that you're experiencing now. But if we can learn to experience our neutral moments as happy moments,